Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar about ad strategies for your mobile games in 2022. We're going to be getting into how to use ads to the most of their advantage in 2022. We'll be talking about trends, we'll be talking about best practices. It's going to be very insightful, very interesting. Now, before we actually get into the discussion, I want to give you a little bit of background about the webinar and about Yotta One. If you have questions, you can put those in the chat. We will have someone in the chat answering questions, and we'll also be asking and answering some developer questions at the end. So make sure to stick around for that. Now, you might know Yotta One as a publisher. We started publishing games in 2011. We have hit games like Rodeo Stampede, Transformers Earth Wars, Ski Safari, and throughout this journey of publishing games, we learned how to monetize them. And in 2019 then, we launched Managed Ad Services, which is a platform for monetizing your game with ads, and it's driven by AI, and thousands of developers are using it. So that's a little bit about our story. Now let's get into the conversation. By the way, my name is Luke. I'm the head of education at Yotta One, and today I have with me Marina, who is the head of partnerships at Yotta One, and also Ali. He is the head of developer experience at Yotta One. So, guys, welcome.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Hello,
Hi
hello.
there.
Yeah, it's great to have both of you. I know both of you are quite busy and doing a lot of stuff helping developers, so it's good that you could both make time for this. Now, maybe we could start just laying a foundation. We're going to get to, I think, some of the really interesting stuff like trends coming into 2022 and what the top developers are doing. But just to sort of lay the groundwork, maybe this is more a question for you, Ali. What are the different types of ads that developers are using, and maybe which of those are more or less popular among developers?
Sure. So about the different type of ads that most commonly are used, the first part of the question are going to be familiar ones that we all have heard about would be the banner ads, the interstitial ads, and also the rewarded video or video ads, what we simply call. So these are the most trending ones, most popular ones, and of course, each one of them comes with their own pros and cons.
But I mean, of those different types of ads, are there ones that tend to be more successful than others, or does it depend on the game, or they're all successful in different ways?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. Actually, it's about like definitely depends on the genre of the game, the type of the game, and the target audiences that you have in mind. But if I have to go into a little more specifics to break it down to make it more understandable and digestible, for example, if we talk about banner ads, they're literally one of the most popular ad types, but that doesn't mean that they are also one of the most successful ad types. But on the other hand, if I talk about rewarded video ads, for example, they're comparatively used very less, but that's the ad type basically where you find most of the best eCPMs or make most of the money. Similarly, interstitial ads as well. I mean, they're very popular, but they're interruptive, not good for the user experience, but still a major source of income compared to the rest of the two ads as well.
Well, that's something I'm hoping we can get to later, especially when it comes to the interstitials, because it's something that can interrupt the experience. But if you can find the balance and do it at the right time, that can be very advantageous for your ad revenue. So I think we'll get to that. But yeah, I wanted to also ask, sort of in general, as someone talking to, maybe this is more for you, Marina, as someone who's always talking to developers, talking to studios of different sizes pretty much on a daily basis, I think, correct me if I'm wrong there, what are some of the common, maybe we can call them mistakes, what are some of the things that you see people just doing wrong that some people are doing right? What are those really common things when it comes to their ad strategy?
I think one, and I mean, I'm no one to say in a sense that every game and every developer has their own learning experience, right? And we have it as well.
It's all a
But I would say
journey.
one common mistake that is actually very hard to prevent is think about the ad placements before you actually make the game, right? Many successful game developers say that the best placed ads are the ones that you have thought about while you were making the game. Let's say, for example, that you know that certain level is going to be tough, but then you already think about how are you going to put this rewarded video in what place. So then the players get a reward and then they are able to make it through the level, right? And you put it, I know, you put the rewarded video in that cage because then when the player finds it, I know it's very organically put inside the game. That makes a very good flow. And that's especially for rewarded videos, right? Because for interstitials or banners, the logic is somehow a bit more simple. Banners, as long as they don't bother you while playing, it's fine. We're not big fans of banner ads, but we understand that for many developers, that's still an important ad type, right? Performance-wise, they are not that interesting. And interstitials, as long as they are well placed between levels when you die, when you go from one level to the other, they are not in between your gameplay, that's fine. But rewarded videos, if you think about where you want to place them when you are designing the game and developing it, there can be a big advantage afterwards because the play time is going to be better fitted with the ads themselves. So that's a very, I don't want to say common mistake. It's more of something that you don't think about in general.
Right.
When you're thinking about your game idea, gameplay, you don't think at that point about ads, right? Because it's like the ugliest thing to think about when you're making the game. But if you do actually, you can find a very smooth way of placing them in the game. So it's something that we encourage our developers to do when they are making a new title. Think about how do you want to monetize that game? Is it a very IAP heavy game, ads heavy game? Where do we place rewarded video? Let's talk about that, right? So this is the type of conversation we like to have with developers when they start a new project, because then it's much better placed in the game. So that would be one piece of advice.
That's interesting. That's just sort of like changing the frame of reference. When you think about your game, you're thinking about story, you're thinking about mechanics, but if it's considered as part of your game, then it's going to feel more natural. Like when you play Candy Crush, it just sort of goes into the flow of the gameplay, and it feels nice to watch a video sometimes to get a few
Totally.
of those bomb things or whatever you
Totally.
get. Yeah.
I will say there's also different types of games, right? Because certain developers will make games that they don't see them as maybe long-term projects, right? It's like, hey, I launched this game, I launched many games very fast, and I put a lot of ads in the game, so I make money with the game soon, etc. Right? So it also depends a little bit on how you think of your game. What's your strategy as a studio? If you want the players to have a very good experience, if you want to prioritize making good money from it, if you make a lot of games very fast and it's for a money purpose. So I would say it also depends, obviously, on what type of a game you're making and what is your strategy as a studio.
Right. Okay. So genre matters, and the style of the game matters for the type of ads you would ultimately choose. So Ali, maybe from slightly, you want to add something?
Of course, there's this one point that actually I want to expand on to give a simple example. If I'm playing for example, an endless runner game, it makes sense to provide a buff, run quickly, collect more coins in lesser time. And at the same time, if I'm playing a first-person shooting game, I'm getting killed frequently. It makes sense to have a reward video pop up and see if I want to revive myself through that reward video. So one common flaw that I see, or maybe lack of attention, these developers want to find their sweet spot by experimenting between different genres. So looking at the two examples, if I, for example, add a puzzle game, reward videos may work as well. But when they're changing genres, they would somehow developers mostly stick to the same ads that they've used. For example, banners plus interstitials, banners plus interstitials. And that's where it gets a little tricky and not taken into consideration that what kind of content does your game have and what kind of target audiences you want to attract to be able to know if this ad strategy is right or not. So experimenting a little differently depending on the genre is important.
So, Ali, there would you say it makes sense if someone is trying to, their strategy going in is optimal ad types for each genre or each specific game? Would a good advice there be go play the top 2 or 3 games that are most similar to yours and see what they're doing, and then maybe build your strategy around some of those principles?
That's correct. That's how it should be, but taking care of the fact that it shouldn't be the exact same carbon copy of the strategy unless you make it unique or make an effort to make it a little different. There are less chances that it will attract more audiences as well. So.
Well, that's modeling as opposed to copying. Yeah, go ahead, Marina.
I learned that from your previous, your last webinar. I learned that from your last webinar.
No, shout out to the ASO course.
Yeah.
Check that out.
Yeah. So I actually, in that point, I think that the advantage of looking at other games in that genre is that you know what most time players who play like one genre will try few games from that genre, right? So you know that if they are playing that other game, that is your benchmark, and they are used to the ads being in certain places, when they come to your game, it's not going to be like, oh, this guy put all these ads in here, because they are used to the ads being thought of that way, right? So if you try to place the ads how you know it's going to be comfortable and the common thing for your players, I think they're not going to be negatively shocked by finding ads in certain places. So you want to put them in a way that is going to make your audience feel comfortable when playing. That's why I think it's good playing ads in a similar games in a similar genre. Of course, as Al said, not copy paste the same thing, because what applies to that game maybe makes 0 sense for my game because the gameplay is not different, right? But I think playing other games is good for many reasons, but ads is one of them.
Right. That makes sense. That's sort of developing a player's mindset. So you have to be both a storyteller, but also someone who can think like a gamer and at least enjoys or knows how to enjoy a game, because then you can see it from that point of view. Well, that kind of leads into one question I really wanted to explore, and that's frequency. And I think this is specifically relevant for people who, you said for interstitials, Ali, that the eCPM tends to be higher than, for example, banner ads, right? But how do you actually, like, okay, my goal is to use banner ads, but I don't want to interrupt I don't want players to be upset so that they just say, okay, I can't play this game anymore. How do you find that optimal balance?
Right. So taking the example of banner ads, for example, there are sometimes trade-offs, but you gotta stay focused on the bigger picture. Actually, banner itself is intrusive to a game. For example, an idle game where you're supposed to see the background and it's constantly changing, but it might be a good fit in a puzzle game. The second aspect of it is how much revenue can it potentially bring you? So the question becomes, is it really worth sacrificing user experience or getting negative reviews, making the game look ugly for a little bit of money? And then we can talk about, for example, interstitials or rewarded videos. So most of it comes down to user feedback, but also A/B testing. So if you are really interested in finding out which ones are, what is the right frequency, you got to test for 3 minutes, you got to test for 5 minutes, and then see what that sweet spot is actually, where players are not leaving, the session time is not reducing, but also the revenue is not reducing and in fact stays stable or goes above what it was before. So A/B testing is usually the right way to find out that sweet spot.
That makes a lot of sense. Marina, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say frequency is mostly important for interstitials, right? Because banners always there, rewarded videos don't have anything to do with frequency per se. But even for interstitials, I think talking about frequency is a bit old school because it's more about where you place them organically in the game, right? Something has to happen for an interstitial to pop up. I mean, whether you die or whether you you open up a new world or I don't know, whatever. Something has to happen for an interstitial to show. Those games where interstitials just pop up while you are walking around and investigating the new map you just unlocked, that's bothering a lot. And that is when you get a lot of bad reviews and bad comments on, oh, this game is so bad, it's all full of ads, I cannot do anything without getting an ad, right? So I wouldn't even talk about frequency in interstitials, because I think it's more about where do I put these interstitials in my game. That's why it's really hard if you look online for, I know, how often should my interstitials pop up? It's hard because now it's more about where do you place them organically, right? I read once that you shouldn't put an interstitial more than, so if I'm playing and I take 2 actions, right? I know I start walking and then I unlock this door, whatever. There's 2 actions. Then you can put an interstitial, but not more often than that, right? That's why I read once. But I still think that's not even enough.
That might be
honestly, for a good player's experience, right? So I think
you mean that would be too much. That would probably be too frequent.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Open door, walk in, ad.
Exactly, that, right? So I think it's about I think it's called natural stops of the game. So think about what are the natural stops of your game and put interstitials there. So it's a natural pause.
I guess the gray area would be something like an endless runner where they are technically deaths, but it doesn't always feel like that one because the restart happens so frequently. It doesn't feel like a boss battle death. It feels like, you're just quickly restarting. So then the frequency is after how many deaths do you show an interstitial?
Exactly. You can actually, Rodeo Stampede is a great example for ad placement, in my opinion. If anyone wants to take a good game where ads are very optimized, Rodeo is one where they are very integrated in the gameplay.
Yeah, I think they've got it down to a science, or I should say we've got it down to a science.
Yeah, we get a lot of players who say, we've checked Rodeo as a benchmark for ad placement. So it's a good one to use as an example.
Yeah, I mean, we use Rodeo is a great example for a lot of things. I mentioned the ASO course earlier, which we just launched. If anyone wants to check that out, we talked about Rodeo a lot in the ASO course because that's another case where it's very we learned a lot about ASO through Rodeo. Well, let's get into one thing that Marina just put in the chat. People can't see it, maybe. Marina just privately messaged me, spam alert. All right. Sorry. So I wanted to actually talk about trends because that's one thing that I think we have a good vantage point because we work with so many developers. One person working by themselves might not have that sort of view of the landscape of what's coming up. So could we get into that? I don't know if Marina or Ali, you want to kick it off, but I want to talk about some things that are maybe starting now, but will be big trends into 2022.
I can start, and I'm sure I will have things to add on. Recently, we're getting a lot of questions about, or more developers being interested in also alternatives, ways, less intrusive ads, let's put it that way. So more developers are now aware about giving a good player experience, right? And that then naturally means also, are there alternatives to interstitials, to banners? Are there alternatives of how me as a developer can make money without disturbing my players, right? So things like non-intrusive ads is something we get asked about frequently. eCPM performance-wise, it's not the best because it's like a banner, right? You as a player, you see it there, but you don't interact at all with it. It's not in the full screen. You can keep playing and have it in the back. So the efficiency of that ad is still a bit questionable. That's why the eCPM is also low, but it's something that is definitely trending. and I'm sure will keep trending, right? And I would say besides that, the Netflix model for games, right? Getting into any of those programs, whether it's in Google Play with Google Play Pass or in Apple Arcade, it's something developers are looking into, not as much as I would have thought, maybe.
Yeah.
That's interesting, actually. If I may add on to this, Luke and Marina.
Sure.
Yeah, the it's definitely non-intrusive ad is going to be the focus in the coming years. But the only thing is that one or two games that we closely looked at using these non-intrusive ads in terms of billboards in the background. CPM wise, I mean, 10% of the industry or developers might be attracted to this, but the rest of the 90% who heavily rely on advertisements as their earning rather than IAPs, it's not really super competitive CPM wise. They don't stand a chance when we compare them to rewarded videos or interstitials. So definitely experience wise, it's important, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's going to be the next big thing immediately in 2021. Though, to conclude on this, native ads, which is not a new concept, but still seems to be very much liked by the developers simply due to the fact on how you can customize it and don't be so interruptive when it comes to the user experience. So that still is game on.
When you say native ads, can you just give a quick explanation of that?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, definitely. Happy to share with as many as possible. So native ads is basically the way it allows you to design it in a way that you can customize the colors, the size, the fonts, everything that's available to you, that it looks like a built-in part of your application, basically match the theme of your apps. So that's what it makes it very less intrusive, or relatively less intrusive, and still provide a very smooth user experience, less making it look like an ad.
So if your game is sort of an 8-bit kind of game, then the ad would be similar. It would look like it's part of the game, in a sense, right?
Correct. Yeah. That's why it suits both mobile games and mobile apps. That's also one of the key benefits why people use it or continue using it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I have one more question. We're going to get to some dev questions we have coming in. We'll get to those in a second. So ask your questions in the chat. We will try our best to get to them. We also will have someone in the chat answering questions. And if any of your questions don't get answered for any reason, make sure to connect with us. We're happy to talk on the phone or chat or whatever. So last question then is, if we just look at the top 1 or 2%, what really separates them from the pack? What are some of the things that you guys are seeing that separates them from the pack in terms of making money with ads? Whether it's developers or smaller studios, bigger studios, what are some of those differentiating things?
Right. So look, there are two things here. One is long-term success and the other is short-term. There are people who put in tons of ads into their games and they make a lot of money in just a couple of days, but then it doesn't remain the same. But the real successful ones, which I would call, are the people who actually don't miss out on any of the game monetization aspects, actually. And to expand a bit more on this, those aspects are from researching to what's trending before you start making a game, actually, your target audiences in mind, grabbing the idea, but to work to deliver similar projects, not exactly the same, yet different. And talking about other aspects, one of those key aspects got to be marketing as well. So that's also a confusing question, but you got to find a balance between organic and inorganic marketing, which is paid promotions and the right amount of focus on on-site ASO, right icons, right kind of A/B testing, and more importantly, leveraging user feedback to your benefit. This is one of some of the most ignored things, or hefty part of the work which developers ignore and don't usually respond to. But if you continue building upon the kind of feedback you're getting from the users, that's exactly what will make you successful in the longer run and turn your game into a scalable business rather.
It sounds like community building too, right? I mean, if you're listening to your players.
Yeah, for
Marina,
sure.
did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I would say focusing more on what they do in terms of monetization, as I think I'll cover the rest. You first need to understand what genre your game belongs to, right? Don't try to have a monetization strategy that makes no sense for the type of game you have. So if you're developing a hardcore strategy game, then check how those games monetize. You probably know because you probably are a player of those games, right? So you understand that those games are not full of ads. Actually, in those cases, 80% of your revenue should come from IIP and not actually from ads, right? It's more IP heavy, so maybe focus more on where to place your in-app purchases, A/B test with the price, and then just have rewarded videos, right? Don't go for interstitials, don't go for banners, focus on rewarded. If you have what we call hardcore type of game. We have some partners who have these type of games. 10% of the revenue comes from mass, but the 90% remaining comes from their in-app purchases. Totally fine, right? But then focus on rewarded video. If you are on the other side and you have hyper casual games, then you want to have a lot of ads in your game, right? You want to have banners and you want to have interstitials, and actually those two more than rewarded videos, right? Because it's like quick gameplay and short, and you want developers to see a lot of ads in their short gameplay time. So if you're on that side, then more games, focus on banners, focus on interstitial. And if you're in the middle, mid-core, casual type of games, right, then understand what developers do, right, is a few things. First, and that's for all, but make sure that whatever monetization provider you're using is filling in all the ads, if possible, right? If you have players in tier 3 countries, make sure that those ad placements are being filled. That means that if you are in a tier 3 country, for example, and you're playing a game, when you click to watch an ad, it has to be filled with an actual ad, right? If there's no ad, you don't get a good experience and the developer doesn't make money, right? So good developers think a lot about what solution am I using for monetization, look at the metrics and understand how many ad placements are they filling, right? You want to have it close to 100% and make sure that all your players around the world are watching these ads. Because if only players in the tier 1 and tier 2 countries are watching ads, then you're probably losing or leaving a lot of money on the table, right? So good developers choose wisely the solution they're using so it fills all the ads, right? And then second, look at your players' feedback, kind of as Al was mentioning about ads, because unhappy players about ads will comment on the store reviews about it, right? So if they be smart, and if your players are saying this game has too many ads, then work on it, reduce the amount of ads, right? Until these comments slowly get away. Because if there's too many, then the engagement is lost and the retention goes down. And best developers look more at this type of metrics, LTV, retention, etc., than at the immediate revenue they are making from the game. Because if you have solid metrics, you're going to be able to make good revenue eventually, right? So focus more on those than on the short-term revenue, I would say. And then just don't have misleading ads would be my last piece of advice. It's very annoying for players to click here and there on the game and suddenly have ads popping up when they didn't want to click on the ad. That's just very bad player experience. And usually in the best games, best developers are careful about that as well, about the experience in the game and not having these misleading advertisings. So
that's good. Yeah, that's good advice. So I mean, the long-term view then is you're feeding many birds with one scone potentially by actually listening to your audience and caring about their experience. That's giving you many advantages. And then when you're actually trying to earn money with ads, you need to make sure, you need to realize that there are people in some part of the world who are not seeing the right ads or they're not well optimized because maybe you're using a single ad network, maybe you're using a biased mediator, and then you're missing out on a huge amount of revenue and you didn't really think about that decision. So that's why that's why Maz is worth considering, because it's an unbiased solution. It's optimizing for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 countries. And so if you, I don't know if you guys want to add anything about Maz, but if you are interested in checking out Maz, as I mentioned at the very start, and Marina also just mentioned it, is an ad monetization platform. It sits on top of mediations and mediates between ad networks to give you the most money possible for the ads that you show. And you don't have to do anything or fiddle with a bunch of knobs. It's driven by AI, and it's constantly being trained by world-class monetization team. Yoda One, as I mentioned at the start, has been doing this for over 10 years, for a long time. So the monetization team knows what they're doing. So if you want to check out Maz, make sure you click on the link, should be in the chat. And also you can scan the QR code that you see on the screen. If you do that within 7 days, then you can also get a free ad design recommendation report. This is more about where you can put ads and how many to use, what you could do to optimize the ads that you put in your game on top of getting using Maz. So make sure to check that out. Do either of you want to add anything about Maz? You guys are the real experts on Maz before we move to the questions.
I do, actually. I want to say one thing related to what you were saying now about ad design recommendation. I mean, besides Maz being the best solution in the market, so everyone check it out, right? There's one very common, you were talking about mistakes in the beginning, right? That we see in developers having too many ads or too few, right? And that's why one of the key things that we do besides Maz itself is helping you improve how the ads are placed in the game. And I cannot emphasize enough how important this is, because you can have the best solution in the world, but if your ads are placed in the wrong places in the game, then you lose players and you are leaving money on the table. Maybe you have one ad showing every 1 hour, right? And then, yeah, sure, we can optimize the networks and everything, but the revenue has a cap. It's not going to go beyond certain level, right? So I cannot emphasize how important it is to focus on ad placement. And that's why we offer that, right? After someone gets on board with Maz, we give what we call an ad design recommendation, where we say, hey, change the frequency of the interstitials, place a rewarded video here, here, here. If you want, of course, that's always optional. It's up to you.
Oh, we don't force them?
We don't force. I don't go to your house.
We should
change the ad
people.
Placement.
We don't force that.
We should, right? I always think we should, but no. I wish we could, because then I'm sure many developers would be making more money.
ADR police, that's what I want.
Yeah, we can. But it's really, really, really helpful, because many developers are amazing at developing the game and making the gameplay fun, but when it comes to where to place the ads, there's a lot of, sometimes we're very conservative, sometimes we're way too crazy and we put too many, right? So finding the right balance and getting an advice from someone who knows about the matter is so important. And then you integrate Maz, which will optimize it for all the countries, all the traffic, everything, tailor-made strategy for your game, and there you go, then it's ready.
I think that's one thing that maybe we don't get, or Yoda One doesn't quite get enough credit for, is, we've been doing this for a long time with our own games. So we have it really finely tuned. You were talking about Crossy Road earlier. So you're getting a lot of that insight from all of that experience, over a decade of experience with over 1 billion players, and that's available essentially. So it's pretty powerful stuff. And actually, that was the first question. One of the questions we got, I'm going to get to a couple questions, dev questions that we collected here. I have no clue where to put ads in my game. What can I do? So that's your question. I guess the answer, maybe I can just answer that. Basically, what Marina just said, plus if you sign up for Maz within the next 7 days, you can get a free ad design recommendation report. So register for Maz, and then that will be part of it, and we'll hone our expertise to give you the best advice possible. And we won't force you to do it, although. Okay, question 2. We got. Hold on. What what are the most important metrics to look at when I use ads in my game? Maybe that's a question for Ali.
Yeah. Thanks, Luke. So
You're welcome.
about this, like most of our developers that rely heavily on advertisements, a major portion of their revenue is coming from new downloads every day. So that's one key metric that usually, it fluctuates a lot, can cause a lot of impact. So when experimenting with ads, reducing or adding more, that's something, it could depend on other factors as well, but something that we need to keep an eye out for. And for the more well-established developers who have returning users, I think day 1, day 7, and day 30 retention is going to define what kind of effect ads can possibly have on those users. So it all comes down to session times and retention.
All right, good advice.
I will add to that, if I may, the most basic, right? I assuming everyone knows, but just in case, eCPMs, impressions are like the basic ones.
Yeah.
I advise is always look at them by ad type. Don't look at your eCPM as a whole, which is again a very common mistake. Oh, my eCPM is low. Well, let's split it by ad type, 1 sec, and then you see, oh, what's dragging it down is the banner eCPM, because banners are obviously low, right? But then you look at your reward video eCPM and it's $20. It's just that banner is $1, and then the average ends up dragging it down. So it's always recommendable to look at impressions, banners by country, looking at your main countries, and by ad type, right? But to be honest, you also don't need to get obsessed with the metrics that you look into, as long as your eCPM and average revenue per DAU, what we call ARPDAU, which is quite key, right? ARPDAU, basically, regardless of how many players you have, that's the revenue you get per player. So if your players are dropping a lot because Christmas is over, you still want your ARPDAU to be stable, right? So it's a metric that you can keep an eye on continuously, regardless, and it's not going to be affected by the ups and downs of your daily active users, right? So ARPDAU is a very good one to look at, because you check how much revenue you make per user. That's another one. And then the last one, sorry, I just think one more is how many ads each player is watching. I think that's important, because we have at the other one kind of a benchmark, depending on what genre your game is in, more or less how many ads your players should be watching per session, right? So as I was mentioning before, so for a very hardcore game, it could be 1 per session, and for hyper casual, it could be 10 per session. So it's good that you know what's the average ads per session your players should be watching, depending on the genre. So then you know if you can go a bit heavier and put more ads, or if you should actually maybe remove some ads to get more or less in the sweet spot for your genre.
Also, is one of the things that goes on to using Maz is the pre-Maz metrics is part of the process, so you can compare your previous monetization solution with how Maz is doing as it optimizes. So
totally.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. Oh, it's about Maz. What's the difference between Maz and another mediator? I kind of talked about that, but I don't know. Ali, do you want to talk about that? What's the difference between Maz and another mediator like Iron Source?
Sure. I'll quickly sum it up. If we talk about different mediators, each one of them, we have like AdMob, we have AppLovin, we have Iron Source. If you look at these networks, they are mediators on its own, but we put it in one package in a way that we are actually choosing between different mediators and then route the traffic to the right one, getting you the maximum or optimal output in terms of revenue or eCPMs. And secondly,
and it's automated, so you don't have to do anything.
It's automated. That's correct. That's what I was getting into, that when you start integrating using mediations, one of the biggest challenges is setting up different accounts. That's not the case with Maz, and that could also result in more complexities to how you integrate, and leading to more ANRN crashes and whatnot. So the way Maz is built, it doesn't require you to do any of that, or for example, even wait for different networks to be paying you at different frequencies, which could be anywhere between 30 to 90 days in most cases before you could finally.
Maz is the 10th of every month, right?
it's the 10th of every month, and get paid all in all, no wait or no nothing. So these are some of the differentiating factors that I think a lot of other providers or some providers might be missing some of these at least. So yeah.
Good explanation. Very clear. Yeah. Yeah, I think very important to note that it's not just that your monetization solution is very well optimized, it's that it's very well optimized and you don't have to do anything once you do the initial setup. It goes by itself. That's pretty cool, because then you're freed up to do cool stuff, like focus on, as you said, maybe do A/B testing with frequency, or work on your get feedback from your players and improve your game, and work on updates and your App Store page and all that stuff you have to think about. Why add another thing you have to think about or work on, right? It's
Correct.
Give that to somebody who really knows how to do it and can actually optimize your revenue so that it's even higher than it was before.
Right. And discussing earlier, like what possibly could be some of the challenges that some people get wrong. This, in fact, is actually one of the things where people end up overcomplicating bid prices, floor prices, CPMs, and get stuck in a loop of repetitive failure or no improvements, to put it that way. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate you both doing this. I know you're both very busy, so thank you so much. It's been very insightful, very interesting. I hope you found it also to be very useful. Be sure to look out for future webinars on different topics. We have a lot of exciting ones coming up. As we've been talking about, if you're interested in MAS, Managed Ad Services, and you think it might work for your game, you can register by clicking the link that you see in the chat or scanning the QR code that you see on the screen. So register by doing that, click the link or scan the QR code. If you do that within 7 days, you can get also a free ad design recommendation report. So within 7 days, you get that along with your registration to MAS. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk at any time on the phone or in a chat. We're always available. So reach out to us. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.